Hello again, my name is Keith and I'm a law student, a writer, and a home brewer, and I am about to discuss the materials and methods of how I make homebrewed beer. And so I'm sitting on the floor now and I'm about to show you my equipment that I've either made myself or purchased in a couple of cases, and I'm going to describe how I make homebrewed beer and what the basic processes are. The process of making homebrewed beer is basically divided into brew day, in which you cook beer. You take the grain and the water and you take the hops and you make the actual beer, you make the actual product in its most basic stage. I'm sorry if I'm shaking this too much. And at the end of the day you have it in a fermenter, and then you have to ferment it for about a week primary. I'm going to do a week primary. A 1 week primary fermentation, and then I'm going to do approximately 2 weeks of secondary fermentation, and there's a little flexibility, a day, two, it doesn't really matter all that much. And then I'm going to put it in the bottles. I'm going to bottle it, and I'm going to let it carbonate for at least a week, and really I'm going to let it go for about 2 or 3 weeks, because it gets better around the 2 or 3 week mark is probably when it's about perfect. It's just right. I'm trying to make that hen signal. I'm sorry. Anyway, this is my equipment, and I've set it up so that I can sort of document this. One is paper towels, very important. That's just a small receptacle. That piece right here is called a you can use a racking cane, which I used to use. This is called an auto siphon. It makes it a little easier to siphon liquids from one container to another by simple gravity. This is my mash and lauter tun. I also use it as my bottling bucket. It's an igloo cooler. It used to have a Gatorade logo right there. I peeled it off. 20 bucks, and some simple plumbing parts that I used to make it possible to drain out. Hold on, I'm going to actually walk over here into my kitchen. Pick this up, show you the ground. This is actually my drawer. This is one of the messier drawers that I have. I'll pick up the airlock and one of these things. There's my, I use that as a bottle capper. I thought I would pick up one of these tubes too. I use these as siphon tubes. These are just, they're tubes. They're food grade plastic, completely safe. Those are actually some bottle caps right there. A couple of airlocks. I use this spoon too for mixing. Anyway, that's my little failure to prepare in this case. I'm usually prepared. Always prepare yourself in advance. I am a Boy Scout, an Eagle Scout, and I should follow that all the time. But this is the actual filter I use. It's actually stainless steel hose from a sink. You use it to connect the water supply to the sink. And this is the airlock. This is actually an airlock. The way it works is it fills up with liquid, and that little bell part that's shaking will sort of float in the liquid. It's actually a sanitary solution called Star San, which is safe to drink in a certain quantity, certainly to mix it a little bit with your beer. I'm sorry if I'm shaking the camera again. Anyway, it keeps the air from outside from mixing with the air inside, because fermentation of beer is basically just the process of anaerobic respiration and glycolysis. In other words, if you remember the high school Krebs cycle, when you have sugar and oxygen, all organisms will go through the Krebs cycle. I'm trying to think if that's really true with all of them. Pretty much. Anyway. When you have oxygen and sugar, the preferred method of producing ATP is to take the sugar and the oxygen and to produce CO2, carbon dioxide, and H2O, water, and produce a lot of ATP. But there's a much less efficient but still useful method I think for all organisms, of either producing other byproducts, including, in the case of yeast, alcohol. So when yeast consume sugar without having any oxygen, they produce alcohol, and that's exactly what's going to happen. if all goes right, and all has always gone right as far as my experience. I'm very sanitary. I handle things very carefully. Anyway, this is how the mash and lauter tun works. It looks like you should get a fair view of that. Basically, that's just a filter at the bottom. There's actually a little dust and stuff. I haven't washed it out yet. But the mash and lauter tun is going to be a place where I mix hot water at approximately 175 degrees with grain. I'm going to mix approximately 4 gallons of water, just over 4 gallons, and 12 pounds of grain. And I will describe the recipe on brew day a little bit. And basically what happens is I'm just going to shut this off. That filter at the bottom will... Basically what happens is the grain and the hot water mix. We're going to mix it for an hour. And while the hot water and the grain is in the lauter tun, mash tun, it will be mash at that point. The hot water and grain will be sort of like oatmeal. At the end of the mashing process, over the course of the hour, amylases A and B, simple enzymes in germinating seeds, including barley seeds, which are malted, which is to say that they're partially germinated, smoked, and then ground into a powder. They're ground into a powder at the brew shop. I might actually video that on brew day. But the hot water and the grain in the mash tun will be mash, and while it's mash, the enzymes which naturally exist and which have been sort of frozen in time by the malting process will break down the starch in the grain and form a sugar. Now that sugar will be in the water even after the process. It will be dissolved in the water, and at that point it will be mash. And when I lauter it, which is I use the filter there as I described earlier, it's just plumbing parts and a cooler which will keep it hot. And this is actually safe to use with hot water. It is a safe type of plastic to use with hot liquids. I'm sure of that. And it does not leach any PBAs or chemicals or anything like that. Completely safe. It will drain the liquid through the filter out of this spigot end here, this nozzle. And I'm going to drain it through tubing. It's going to be food safe tubing. This isn't the tubing, but you actually saw the tube when I showed you the drawer over there a little earlier. Anyway, it's going to go to the fermenter bucket, and at that point I'm going to have to boil it and mix in the hops, which is the next stage. Mashing and lautering adds the grain to the water and dissolves the parts of the grain that basically you need, including sugar, for the next stage. The next stage is the boil. I'm going to take these two pots here and I'm going to boil the liquid. I'm going to boil what at that point is called wort. This is where the hops is added for flavor. And boiling takes 1 hour. We'll boil down the liquid, which is at this point fairly diluted. It will concentrate the liquid, and at that point I'm going to have to cool it down so that it will be a hospitable temperature for yeast. This is my wort chiller, and the way it works is I'm going to have one of these tubes is connected to the sink. It's actually the lighter colored tube. There's a clear tube here. There's a sort of white or milky colored tube. The milky tube is going to connect to the sink through this piece here, which is a female adapter for the sink. And I'm going to have water flowing from one tube into the copper tube here, which is going to be inside of, sorry about that, it's going to be inside the cooking pot, and the water is going to flow into the copper tube. The water is going to flow out of the copper tube. It's going to be much hotter at that point. It's going to absorb some of the heat from the hot liquid. It's going to cool it down, and then once I have it at a hospitable temperature for yeast, I'm going to put it in the primary fermenter. This, I think it's a 6.5 gallon bucket here. It is True Brew brand, and I'm going to have it in the bucket for about a week. I'm going to siphon it off into this glass 6.5 gallon, whatever it is, jug, which is called a carboy. This is going to be my secondary fermentation for 2 weeks, Then I'm going to put it in the bottles, bottle cap the bottles, and it will be what's called green at that point, green beer. And I am going to let it age and carbonate for about 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. And at that point, it will be beer and it will be drinkable, and I'll enjoy it. And the people that come, hopefully you'll all come back. Maybe some of the rest of you will have some of the stout we make. And if you have any interest in homebrewing, I suggest you contact your local. Sorry about that. Your local homebrewing club or your local homebrewing shop. And anybody who's interested, maybe shoot me an email or ask me a question if you know me personally. And good luck and cheers.